So the big news lately in the new age Mustang world is this Cobra R sold for $132,500, and this car was actually in Canada. So it was on Bring a Trailer, and people were asking, is that Canadian leaves? And they said no, it's actually US dollars is what it's sold in, which put a new high for a record for Cobra R, 623 miles, so pretty low mileage as it is, and beautiful car. They were all performance red, these 2000 Cobra Rs. You can see the front splitter with the Zeus fittings, and we'll look closer at that in a minute here. You can see the BF Goodrich tires, a lot of joint venture partnerships of this car, and we'll get to that in a minute. In the book, it shows the companies that were involved in helping this car come to be. So looking at the front bumper, looks in pretty good shape. A lot of these cars had problems with the front splitter scraping on things, and we'll see a little bit of damage to this splitter as we look through these pictures. But overall, a 623 mile car, there's not much to complain about, and the car just looks fantastic. There have been people who have broken those spoilers. There's actually a story about someone who was jogging down the street and their sweater caught the end of one of those spoilers of a Cobra R parked on the road and ripped off half of that spoiler and broke it. So a lot of really interesting stories like that, and those are hard to find. So every part on this car is going to be valuable and specific to the Cobra R, and hard to find for things like that. It does have a V6 Mustang rear bumper with no dual exhaust cutouts because it has side exit exhaust. But the amber taillights are something everybody loves, those turn signal in the bottom section of the taillight there. But beautiful looking car, performance red, and like I said, for the mileage it has on it, there's really not much you can complain about. Looking at the car, you can see there's that front splitter and those Zeus fittings, and the Cobra R ducting for the brakes. We'll see that in another picture here soon. Like I said, V6 rear bumper, performance red. The headlights on the Cobra R were actually before their time. The 99 and 2000 had the clear chrome reflective headlights, and the 2000 Cobra R actually got the 01 to 04 style black housing headlights, so that's kind of cool to see. But looking through these pictures, I noticed the hardware for the license plate is incorrect, which is funny for such a low mileage car that it would actually have screws there. No big deal, you could get those anywhere. There's those beautiful amber taillights that everybody is raving about these days. You can go up to over $1,000 on eBay for a set of those. And there's those fittings they twist on, and then you can put the bottom section of the splitter on, and a lot of people kept this off the car when they were driving it around the street because a soda can will barely fit underneath one of those. Now the hood is something to pay special attention to because there were a lot of Cobra Rs that had defects in the paint of the hood. The hoods were actually not painted on site or put on the car on site. They were put on later after the production process, and even some people would say that the hardware on the fenders had to be adjusted, and so sometimes the paint's missing on the hardware that aligns the fenders, and that scares people that the car has been in an accident. There's the antenna delete, that's a section there, pretty cool to see because the car did not even have a radio in it. The lines for the bumper to the fender look great. Everything looks fantastic on this car. Of course, it's just a brand new car with 600 miles on it, so like I said, not much to complain about. The side scoops were interesting on the Cobra. In 2001 they even stayed with this style on the Cobra, although the GT's got a full side scoop. The side exit exhaust looks pretty good. We'll look at that more. That's actually a Borla exhaust, and it's a Bassani mid-pipe. And so that's really cool to see Ford doing joint ventures with those companies. So those are correct with the correct tips. There were actually quite a few people who changed those out for a different style. So nice to see those original ones. They look really good. You can see they're not dark from running rich or racing. So you don't know if this car's ever been beat on, but it actually has had 6 owners, and the Carfax shows that there's no damage history, but it was in Florida, Indiana, Illinois, Georgia, and British Columbia. So that's a lot of places this car has been. Here's the R-Wing, the spoiler. There are aftermarket spoilers made of these, but this obviously is the original one, and those are hard to find. So good to see all those pictures. It kind of looks like there might be a scratch there, but I think it's just the reflection. Yeah, that's just a reflection. It's hard to tell. With a car like this, there could be little pieces of damage that you'll see. This car actually does have a few little scrapes and things on it, but mostly on the splitter. Running horse, yes, all the Cobras came with them. Cobra badges on the fenders. That one does look like it's tilted back a little bit, but that's common. I've seen Cobras where the snake is kind of tilted back slightly. The passenger side didn't look like it. SVT badge was specific for 2000 and 2001. That was a badge that was on the back of the car for those years. Glass looks great. Something to look for is the original glass to make sure it has the running horse in it, and that is there. Now you can buy a replacement one from Ford, so the glass is available with the horse on it from Carl Light. So not sure if that was replaced. There's no reason it probably would be. All the glass has the Ford logo on it. I think they're doing a great job of documenting this car. No Mach 460 rear kidneys on the back of there, so that would be like a base model V6 car would have, or a non-Mach audio car. So here's some of the scratching on the splitter, and that is inevitable on a Cobra R. So they did show this in the pictures. There are some scrapes under here, and every Cobra R is probably going to have something like that unless the splitter was never put on the car. Little gouges here and there. And like I said, some people would just leave these off the car. It's kind of a little dent there, a little puncture. These are the 18 by 9.5 inch Cobra R wheels for 2000 only, and they're pretty cool. And there's a neat little section of history about these, how when they went down the assembly line they wouldn't fit in the rails, so at a certain part of the assembly line they had to come and actually put those on by hand and feed them into the line. They couldn't go down the belt system that delivered the wheels. A lot of really neat things. No Mach tweeters there, obviously, no radio, no cruise control buttons. The steering wheel looks so interesting without the cruise buttons there, especially with the Cobra airbag. And there's that shift knob. We'll look at that in a second here. And here are the cool Recaro seats, and something neat was the snake on the seat belt. We'll see a better picture of that here up close in a second here, but neat to see how there's no hooks on the seats for the seat belts like the other New Edge Mustangs would have. A little bit of wear on the seat there, but I think it's just the way the factory defect would be. Cobra R Recaro seats, another part of cool history with Ford. There's the seat belt with a snake on it like the earlier Cobras had, although the 03, 04 Cobras did not have that. I love that these cars did have power windows and door locks, because I know the earlier ones had roll-up windows and stuff, but this is cool to see a Cobra R race car, but it still had windows that rolled up and down. This is neat. It says, never operate this vehicle in snow or ice, as a loss of vehicle control may result with the risk of serious injury or death. That's because the Cobra Rs do not have a traction control system, and they had to put that warning on there. So neat to see some of the specific stickers. See, there's no traction control switch. That's where it would be on the 2000 year, and it's not there, obviously. Rest of the car is looking great inside. We'll look at that sticker inside the glove box later. It's specific to the Cobra R. Seats, seat belts with the snake on them again. Pretty cool looking. 6-speed there, and door panels are just beautiful, normal, just like they'd be on any other Mustang. The seat rails are kind of cool because they had to be different to work with the Cobra R. And just a beautiful interior, just looks nice. This just looks like a brand new car. Cobra airbag, same as any other Cobra would be for 99 to 04. It does have rear defrost, which I thought was pretty cool. Here's the gauge cluster and 623 miles, white face gauges specific to the Cobra R with 180 mile-an-hour speedometer. So that's pretty cool to see, because that is a specific Cobra 2000 Cobra R piece there. So no radio. Pretty cool to see the only a heater in the car, so no air conditioning with the Cobra R. So that piece is specific and kind of cool to see. And looking at the shift knob, it is a 6-speed leather wrapped shift knob. So the first one to be like that, it's different than the Terminator Cobra would have with the 6-speed. So specific piece there. Center console normal as any other Mustang. I found it interesting that there's no covers over the bottom section of the bolts for the seats there, because usually there's plastic covers there on all the other cars, all the other Mustangs. It's the rear seat delete, so pretty cool that the Cobra R came with that. And this is a all business, no messing around race car. I love the floor mats. These are stock Mustang floor mats. They don't have the snake on them or Cobra or anything. They're just the beautiful normal ones. There's the bracketry for the seats. Just rails, no power seat on the driver's side, like other Mustangs would have a power seat, at least on the driver's side. With the floor mats removed, you can just see where the floor mats were sitting, and that's just the carpet, nice and clean there, and looking good. It's just such a clean car, carpeting, just everything it should be. Now the rear spare tire is actually pretty cool. The jack was specific to the Cobra R because it had to clear the side exit exhaust for the pinch welds where you lift. So I thought that was actually pretty cool to know that that is different, and the whole wheel back there is actually different. No trunk liner. Just everything is just business back here. All the Mustangs would have a carpeted trunk there, and you can see the FPDM and all the normal stuff that the car would have back there. But this is cool. The spare tire says, to avoid possible rear axle damage, use this tire on the front axle only. To replace a rear flat tire, put the spare tire on the front axle and place the front tire on the rear axle. So it's saying basically don't put this on the rear of the vehicle. And the reason for that is because this is a 17/8 wheel. This is not a 18/9.5 wheel that the Cobra R would have. This is actually a wheel from a 98 Cobra. That's where this wheel would have come from. And that's kind of cool because 98 was a 1 year only wheel. I'm surprised they didn't use a 99 Cobra wheel, but they needed this 98 Cobra wheel and tire as a full-size spare. And the reason they don't want you putting this on the rear of the car is because it's a different size than the 18-inch wheel. And if you put that on the back of the car and you have the normal size on the other side of the back of the car, it's going to mess up your differential, it's going to mess up the gears, it can do some damage. So they say go ahead, and if you get a rear flat tire, then take the wheel from the front of the car and put it on the rear and put the spare on the front, because the front doesn't really matter. It doesn't have a front axle with gears that are going to be grinding each other if they're off. So put this on the front of the car all the time, and if you get a front flat tire, then that's fine, just put this on the front. But if you do get a flat tire on the rear, make sure that the front wheel comes off the car and goes onto the back, and that this only goes on the front of the car. So I thought that was pretty interesting, but it's cool to see one of these. You can see it with a yellow sticker on it, and I really like that they did this, and you never see this picture anywhere. If you Google 2000 Cobra R spare tire or spare wheel, it's just going to come up with tire sizes, and it's going to refer to the 18-inch wheels, and there are very few pictures on the internet of someone who's actually had this tire out. And I think somebody had this out of their 2000 Cobra R, and the car must have been sitting on it for some reason or something, because there's a flat spot and it's really dirty. But they were selling this in the jack, and they were trying to see what it was worth, and somebody said since they're both specific to the Cobra R, that could be like $1,000 sale right there for those pieces. So pretty cool to see. I really like seeing that. And the seller of this wheel had said something to the extent of they're all about weight reduction, they want it out of the car, they want to go fast, and so they don't really care to have this around anymore. I'm sure they probably just take the car to the track, and it's probably out with a trailer or something, so they don't really need it. But personally, I would hold on to that. I think that's a pretty cool piece of history right there. So looking in the trunk liner, looks really good underneath there. No rust forming. There have been some very low mileage 100-mile cars that have rust already forming inside because they weren't kept in a nice climate. Maybe they were parked in the dirt somewhere in a barn. But there's the really cool intake manifold for the Cobra R, the 5.4 liter dual overhead cam engine, 385 horse, 385 torque, although those are said to have been underrated from the factory. Usually you don't have exactly the same horsepower and torque numbers, so usually there's a little more power there. So pretty cool to see, though. That's a lot of neat engineering that Ford went through to get that all to work out. Here's a cool sticker on there. It says use 15W50 synthetic engine oil. I thought that was pretty cool. Looking at the underside of the hood, you can see there's no brace on the passenger side. That is correct. See how the passenger side has no bracing. That's correct for a 2000 Cobra R. There have been aftermarket hoods that have the whole bracing, and like I said, some of these hoods were replaced because people didn't like the paint work on them, so that's something to look for. Looking underneath the car, you can see here's where we start to see a little bit of damage on the splitter, some chips out of the paint and some scuffs. There have been people who have repainted these, so I would rather have an original one, even if it has a couple chips in it, than one that's been repainted. Performance red looks really good. It's almost like an orange color. There's the rocker panels underneath, pinch welds looking good, probably never jacked up. See the paint's a little lighter in some spots there, kind of interesting to see. There's some more of the exhaust and the side skirts looking, but kind of interesting how the paint doesn't fully cover the rocker panels under there. That's production, the way it should be. BF Goodrich tires, just kind of looking underneath the car. Here's the K-member, a Canton oil pan, so that's pretty cool to see. We'll see that on the part list for specific 2000 Cobra R pieces. So that oil pan is aftermarket, but Ford put them on there. So kind of cool to see that underneath there, but the rest of it all looks factory. Fun to see the splitter, how far it actually goes underneath the car when you look underneath the front of the car there. Here's the 6-speed Tremec T56 transmission. Not the same as the 03 Cobra, but similar. And this is cool because it shows the blue top there. That is a B&M shifter. So for the T56, Ford outsourced the shifter and they got a B&M performance shifter for the car, so you can see that in this picture. Interesting that the driver's side catalytic converter is a little darker than the passenger side one. Maybe it's just how the engine operates and controls, but there is a kind of dark spots under the car. I imagine that's probably factory, unless it's something that was, you know, the condition of where the car was stored. Maybe it started to get those black marks under there. I haven't really seen much like that, but that could be just normal for the Cobra R. But the rest of it looks clean. Doesn't look like there's any rust, especially up under the back bumper. Here's the Bassani mid-pipe, X-pipe, and it looks like the X section of the Bassani part was welded into factory Ford piping on each end. That's what it looks like to me. I don't know how they went about going to Bassani and having that made, or if they had Ford do the rest of the piping and they just use the X section from Bassani, but that looks pretty cool, along with the Borla mufflers. And so these are Borla mufflers that have intakes on the inner side and then the outlets that go to the side exit exhaust. See the exhaust pipes coming out there in front of the back wheels, and then this cool Borla bracket that goes up and uses the factory exhaust hangers, and that's pretty cool to see all that. The independent rear suspension, just like the 99 Cobra, and it has the 355 gears in it. So diff cover is probably the same as the 99 Cobra. You can see the suspension, Eibach springs, and Bilstein struts, and that's pretty cool to see all that in there. The air ducting here for the brakes, that's pretty cool for the Cobra R only. And the spindles and everything, they look pretty neat. Looks like they're almost like a different type of wheel hub there. And maybe they are. It's weird that that strut has a little bit of wear at the bottom of it and a little bit of surface rust on the control arms. You can see those Eibach springs in there too, the red ones. Looking at the invoice sticker in the door jamb, this has the VIN number and basic things about the car, but if you look down, there's INTR, TR, that means interior trim, and that's DW. I'm pretty sure that would be for the Cobra R. I know like KW is for the Bullet Mustang only, and there's other ones that are specific to the different kinds of vehicles Ford made. And so you also have the exterior paint, the ES, which is performance red. All the Cobra Rs were that color, so that's good to see those things because you know this is a real Cobra R. I like how the sticker in the glove box has the Cobra R logo on the top left where it says Mustang, and that this sticker is specific to a Cobra R. So this is pretty cool. You have to think that Ford had to go through and change all these things for the car, and for 300 cars, just for the 2000 Cobra R, they had to do all the work to go through and redo this sticker, and I'm sure they probably have a template and stuff, but going through and making this is pretty cool. And you see the tire dimensions, the P265/40 ZR18 with the asterisk and 97Y, and that's showing the tire size. So basically it's a 265 wide tire on an 18-inch wheel, and they're 9.5 inches wide. And so as far as I know, that was the largest wheel on a production Mustang up until that point. Later you get the 19s and the 20-inch wheels and stuff, and but here in the year 2000, that was a pretty big wheel. And it's pretty cool to look through here and read all this and look at the spare tire section. It has the 245 45 17, which we talked about is the 98 Cobra wheel. So that was all in there, and that was a stock wheel for a 98 Cobra. And so it's interesting that that's on the sheet here, the little sticker, and then it even tells you must be replaced with an equivalent type speed rating tire, and it has a tire pressure of 34 pounds in the front and 32 in the rear. So I think that's kind of interesting. And just going through and seeing all of this, and for sustained high-speed trailer towing, which no one's going to be towing a trailer, but this is all in the owner's guide, so it's talking about that. But I think that's a pretty cool sticker. And here under the hood we have another vehicle sticker of vehicle emission control information, and this looks like the same sticker you find on other cars, but it does say that this engine runs on SAE 15W50 oil, so that is different than other Mustangs, and so this label had to be recreated, and it shows the 2000 model year, and it has a number at the bottom and everything, so that's pretty cool to see. That's a Cobra R specific sticker. This sticker says if engine fails to start, the vehicle is equipped with a fuel pump shutoff switch. Now I think that's referring to the inertia switch in the trunk. This black box on the far left, that would be right behind the driver's side tail light, that has a little red button that pops up if it feels like the car has been in an impact. It'll shut the fuel pumps off and it'll pop that switch. It's like a circuit breaker, and then you just push the button back down and it will go, and the car will start fine again. So I assume that's what it's referring to. My '03 Cobra, I just looked at it, it also has that. It doesn't have a sticker on the hood, but it does have one down on the radiator cowl, and right in front of the radiator, a little plastic piece, and it says the same thing, refer to the owner's manual. So I assume it's just talking about the inertia switch. I don't think the Cobra R had an actual fuel shutoff switch like some race cars do. But if it does and you know about it, put that in the comments. I'm pretty sure they don't have that though. This sticker just says use green coolant only. Basically, there is a vacuum hose routing sticker, which is pretty cool, and if you look down, it does say 5.4 liter, and it has a number, and it even gives you the spark plug gap. On here shows 0.040 to 0.044, and I believe that's actually the same range about as the '03 Cobra that I just looked at, even though when you get into boost and stuff you would gap that down tighter, but I just think that's interesting. It has that in here. And then it says be careful of the fan, it can turn on at any moment. And this one, of course, we talked about. Never operate this vehicle in snow or ice, as a loss of vehicle control may result with the risk of serious injury or death. Could be because I don't believe the Cobra R had a traction control system, as far as I know, and the tires, I'm sure, are not rated for anything other than the racetrack, so that's probably why they put that sticker there. This was a cool sticker that was also in the door jamb area. And then this is an invoice, and looking at it, I know it's difficult to see, but I have it zoomed in on another screen I'm looking at right here. And it's showing the information of the vehicle, the mileage. This is actually a recent invoice, and it was at a Ford dealership in Vancouver, and it's showing an oil change and stuff. And so it says the service is starting at $89, change engine oil and filter, multi-purpose inspection, multi-point inspection, check brakes, check battery, top off fluids, includes up to 5 liters of oil. And it also says oil and filter right here it's showing the oil filter is the same as the Mustang, the FL 820S. That's the 4.6 liter, same as the Cobra or the Mach 1 GT. That's the same oil filter that I use on mine, but it says here 9, I believe that's 9 quarts of Redline 15W50 synthetic oil, and I believe it's 25 a quart. It's bringing it up to $270 worth of oil and labor and things, and as you continue it goes down, and there's a little notes section that says additional time to lift exhaust higher to raise vehicle up for hoist, because the Cobra R with a side exit exhaust has that issue where you can't just put it on a normal lift, I guess, according to this. And it says they performed the vehicle inspection, found engine oil cooler fins were bent, no signs of leak at this time, oil and fluid levels okay. Top off washer fluid, no leaks found at this time. Adjust the tire pressure. Front brakes are within spec, rear within spec, tire tread within spec, and all that stuff. And so all in all, this comes down to the next invoice, which is a total of about $500. 400, yeah. The total amount was $549 for all labor, $234, parts $235, total charges $476, and then with tax. And so that's interesting that it went through this, and there's even a multi-point inspection sheet, which I thought was interesting, because if you look through that one, it goes through and it checks everything's in the green, everything's okay and operational. Although on the tires, I was curious if it had the original tires on it, which I believe it does. It has tire age, and that's blank on all the tires, and so it shows the tread depth is okay, it shows the wear pattern's fine, it shows the tire pressure is set to factory, you know, has all of that stuff in the multi-point inspection, but it doesn't show the age of the tires. So I thought that was kind of funny. But everything else operational: lights, HVAC, brake system, shocks, struts, exhaust, everything was checked off on that inspection nicely. They do have a certificate for the Cobra R, and it has the VIN number. It shows it's a limited edition 2000 Mustang Cobra R, assembled at the Dearborn Assembly Plant on March 14th, 2000, and it's vehicle number 22 of 300. So that's actually a pretty low production number. It's one of the earlier cars, and that's kind of interesting to see. Now, this SVT certificate, it is a reproduction, according to the fact that if you look at the bottom, it says Ford Performance Group. Ford Performance wasn't changed until later. SVT was around before Ford Performance took over, basically before they changed the name and everything. So you can still get these that say SVT on them, and it's signed by Etzelby Ford II, but it's not signed by the SVT engineers and chief engineers of that time. So I believe that's a reproduction certificate, which I also have a reproduction for both of my Cobras. The original ones to the cars are still with the original owners of the cars wherever they are. And so I believe that is a reproduction as well. And this car having 6 owners, it's only obvious that one of them probably kept that. Now, something that's very big about these Cobra Rs that you should get is the black binder. Now, the black binder looks like just a normal binder with the Cobra R logo on it, but this is very important because it has some really neat information in it, and it should have a metal plaque inside that's called a dash plaque that should have the build number on it, and it's the only one ever made for the car. So I believe that was missing for this car too, because I didn't see it in any of the paperwork, and I didn't see the plaque in the binder. And so here you have the owner's manual on the left in the plastic, which they have taken it out of the plastic in another picture you'll see. But you see it does have the black binder, so that's good news, because those are one-off as well, and people have paid, you know, $1,000 for one of those if they can find them. And so it's good that this car has the black binder with it. And so here's an example of what the dash plaque would look like. This is from another car. So it has the Cobra R logo on the left, Ford in the middle, SVT, and then above it the VIN number and the build number of 300. So kind of hard to see. These are hard to find pictures of on the internet as it is. Here's kind of a blurry one, but you get the idea. Pretty cool to see. This car did come with this much documentation though, so that's pretty good. And here's the black binder. You can see the flaps are kind of torn up a little bit. That's very normal. I've seen them like that. I've seen them torn up even worse. There's a lot of things inside this binder that are kind of fun to look at. There's this sheet here that says, it's like a welcome letter. Dear 2000 Cobra R owner, congratulations on your decision to acquire a 2000 SVT Cobra R. Welcome to the SVT family. We trust that your Cobra R will provide you with many years of enjoyment and create many wonderful memories. And it goes on to continue talking about the Cobra R and how, you know, the team has been dedicated to enthusiasts, and you know, they launched the SVT name. Actually, it says in 1991 they started SVT, staffing it with a core group of dedicated enthusiasts, and the mission is simple but very ambitious. It's to create a line of high performance vehicles that satisfy the most demanding driving enthusiasts, and to back those products up with a group of Ford dealers who understand the special requirements of performance to the customers. And so it goes through, you know, 9 years. SVT has grown to become comprehensive high performance vehicle development and marketing organization, and goes on and on about that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool to see. But it says it's more than just great cars and trucks, but it's really about philosophy, and you know, pretty cool letter. It's fun to read through all that stuff. It talks about performance, substance, exclusivity, and then it's just kind of fun to look through the binder and see the other stuff that's in there, and you know, the SVT certificate again, and the 2000 SVT Cobra R technical data sheet. And it talks about the configuration of the engine, that it's a longitudinally mounted 90-degree V8. It's a cast iron block with aluminum heads, forged steel crankshaft, and billet steel connecting rods, forged aluminum pistons, McLeod aluminum flywheel. So right there, that's pretty cool, because a lot of people think that the Terminators were the first, you know, fully forged engines, but according to this, the forged crankshaft, and it has billet connecting rods, which are pretty strong, and forged pistons. So that's neat to know that that was all made pre-runner to the Terminator Cobra. And talks about the bore and stroke, displacements 5.4, compression ratios 9:6. So that's like pretty low compression actually. New Coyote engines are like 11 or 12, you know, and the Mach 1 was 10. So it's pretty cool to see that it wasn't like super high compression, and it still made 385 horse rated, which was underrated. And talks about the red line, talks about the dual overhead cams and the secondary chains and all of that, roller finger followers, hydraulic lash adjusters. So basically a 4-valve engine there. It does say it has beehive shaped valve springs, which I think is kind of interesting. And of course 4 valves per cylinder. And then of course talks about intake valves, exhaust, ignition, sequential fuel injection. So basically just going through there. Mass air sensors 80 millimeters. Air filter says it's a K&N, so that's pretty cool. Like we talked about, this car has a lot of aftermarket part companies that came together to work with Ford with this, so that's pretty cool. The exhaust manifolds, stainless steel short tube headers, and those did look aftermarket when we were looking underneath the car. They looked special for the car. Exhaust system, the Bassani X pipe, which we saw and talked about, and it says 98 Cobra catalysts, Borla mufflers, and side exit exhaust. So that's interesting. It would say 98 Cobra cat system, and the Borla mufflers we talked about and saw. That's pretty cool. Now it does talk about the transmission and the T56, and it is different than the T56 that would be in the 03-04 Cobra. And a lot of that has to do with the gear ratios. This one has the first gears at 297, and The 0304 Cobra has a 266 first gear, and the difference there is a 297 is a taller, longer gear, and it's better for road racing, which is what the Cobra R is more about. And so it's pretty cool that you can see that. Now when you go to buy a 256 Magnum, you usually have the choice between a 297 or a 266 first gear. So pretty cool to see that, and just everybody who's talked about over the years buying a T56 out of a wrecked Cobra R said that it had the 297 first gear, and it was something that they would disclose to tell people that it's not really the same as the 03 Cobra with the 266 first gear. So I've seen that before in listings on Craigslist, and maybe I was just lucky to see an actual Cobra R T56 on Craigslist before. But it does talk about the 4-inch aluminum drive shaft, and the rear axle being the 8.8 ring gear. Like I had mentioned, I was pretty sure it was a 355, and it is. And so it's a 355 gear, which later the Mach 1s and Terminators would all come with. Earlier, the Cobras had 327 gears, so it's pretty cool to see a 355 axle. I think that's a really good gear. And it talks about the half shafts, GKN. It says they're hardened with 31 spline teeth, so that's pretty cool. I was wondering if they were 31 spline axle shafts, because I know the earlier Cobras weren't, and then the Terminators were, and so it looks like the Cobra R had 31 spline axles. And so it's also talking here about the modified McPherson strut with gas charged monotube Bilstein struts, and they're 800 pounds per inch. Eyebox springs, we talked about that with the red springs, lowering springs basically, but good for road racing. And the 28 millimeter tubular stabilizer bar, the high durometer lower control arm bushings, and in the rear it has a dual A-arm independent gas charged Bilstein monotube shock absorber as well, 750 pound. I bought coil springs, 26 millimeter stabilizer bar, and the high durometer bushings on the suspension mounts. Now I thought it was cool they had pictures of them building these Cobra R engines and other parts of the assembly, and this says that the engine build process took about 4 months and was done at the Ford prototype engine manufacturing facility. And in this photo, the engine fixture is upside down as a technician whose name is Mark Smith installs the Canton Racing oil pan. So you can see that oil pan there is an aftermarket one. I believe it's higher capacity as well. Those are very popular in the Mustang world, and so it's pretty cool to see that they went to the point to go ahead and put one of those on the car. Here it shows the unibody going down the assembly line, and it just says that the floor pan is being welded at Dearborn Assembly Plant, and the SVT Cobra R build utilizes the same welding lines as the SVT Cobra, so I'd imagine that's the same as the Mustang itself, the whole unibody. But then as it continues, it shows it in these other parts where it says after the bodies were welded together, unique holes were drilled for the oil cooler brackets, power steering, heater box, overflow bottle, and air filter assembly. And the body was then primed, sealed, and sent to the paint shop. And then it shows the engines on crates, and it said that the 5.4 engines would come on a crate that had 3 to a pallet. So I thought that was kind of cool, and it looks like the top Cobra R logo isn't on there yet. And now it shows the bodies of the car all painted and ready to go, and it says that the photo shows the Cobra R bodies after they've been painted, and the sound control materials were not installed in order to reduce weight. So that's like sound deadening. And I had actually seen someone recently who's making a nice Cobra R replica, and he's going through and even removing all of the sound deadening material in his Mustang that he's turning into a Cobra R replica, just to make it like this and make it as correct as he can. And so that's pretty cool. And it says the painted bodies proceeded directly to the trim line. When the bodies got to the instrument panel installation area, the powertrain assembly began. And then there's a picture of all the engines going down the line, and it says that the engines were hung on a transfer line to begin the powertrain build process. The 6-speed transmission was mated to the engine, and then the engine mounts, CAT systems, wiring were installed. After the engine system was complete, it met up with the body coming out of the instrument panel installation area. And then when it shows the drivetrain actually going into the car, that's pretty interesting because it says that the biggest challenge of the build process was the engine installation, and that SVE and the plant had to determine how to deck the 5.4 engine with standard production cycle times. It was necessary to change the install angle, fixtures, and the decking sled. So basically what it took to get the engine to go up into the car had to be tweaked to make that all happen. And what we talked about with the wheels going on the car earlier, you can see this is the conveyor where the conveyor belt feeds the wheels down, and it sets it down in order of what car is going down the line and what needed what wheel next, if it was a GT or a V6. But it said the Cobra R wheels were too big to fit on that conveyor, and they'd probably get stuck because that conveyor had probably only seen 17-inch wheels as the biggest wheels ever going down there at the time. And so they had to bring the Cobra R wheels in, and that had to go through the whole process of making sure that the next wheels coming down the belt went onto the next car, and the Cobra R would be in that lineup somewhere because it was produced with the other cars at Dearborn. And so it was part of the whole process. I'm sure that there were headaches involved, and they had to do a lot of things to make these cars happen. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, let's build the Cobra R. Okay, well, we'll just put a couple of big engines in them and send them off. It's like, no, there's a lot involved in, from the wheels to the way the engine goes in to the independent rear suspension to all of the stuff involved. There's a lot that they had to do to make this car happen. Now, putting the independent rear suspension into the back of the Cobra was the same process as the 99 and later the 01 Cobra and the 0304 Cobra with the independent rear suspension. So that process was already down. It just talks about how it had some higher aftermarket pieces or higher end pieces and bushings in that independent rear suspension. And so here's the seats ready to go into the car. I think that's pretty cool. You have to realize 300 cars, that's 600 seats because there's 2 seats that go in the Cobra R. Of course, no rear seat, and I'm sure that was part of the production process as well. But here's the Recaro seats getting ready to go into the car, and so just part of the whole process of getting those lined up and staged and ready to go in the car. And here's a cool picture of the Cobra R coming off the assembly line, but you'll notice it doesn't have a hood on it, it doesn't have the front splitter on it, and it's basically saying that when it comes off the line, the cars were then shipped to a second location for the installation of the hood, the wing, the spoiler, and the front splitter, which was usually delivered in the trunk. So they would take the front splitters and put them inside the car. And there are some pretty cool videos. Revan Evan, one of the cool guys from Muscle Mustang and Fast Forward magazines in the past, who did lots of reviews on these cars, and he test drove these cars. He was an editor for the magazines, and he's gone to some pretty cool collections, and one of them has a Cobra R still on the plastic, and it has the splitter inside the car just the way it was shipped. So that's pretty cool. And Enthusiast Garage, another really great channel, and I love watching him. He had a Cobra R. He had a really great, highly documented Cobra R, and he had talked about how the bolts on the fenders were sometimes loosened, which chipped some of the paint off of the fender bolts in the engine bay because the hood wasn't on the car when it went down the line. It was put on later, and sometimes they'd have to loosen those bolts and move them around to make sure the hood would clear the fenders. And so that was part of all this, and that's pretty cool to see the car like this. And I've learned things from those other great people who have great YouTube channels and who are great enthusiasts as well. And I really enjoy watching their stuff and learning from them, and I've learned a lot from them as well. And so That's pretty cool to see a Cobra coming off the assembly line like that, and then it was going to go somewhere else. And like we talked about, the hoods had defects, and there was someone, I think, who didn't like that the hood had some bubbles on it, and so they would ask for another hood. I believe it was Enthusiast's Garage YouTube channel who had the Cobra R and said that the Cobra R he had bought turned out didn't have the original hood on his car because the person had noticed the bubbling in the paint on the hood, and so he went back and had them take one of the hoods off of a Cobra R that hadn't been put on the car yet, because they were all in racks where the second location was, and they just traded him hoods and put a different hood on the car that was in better shape. But it's very common for those hoods to have bubbling or defects in them, so that's really not a problem. But anyway, just lots of cool stories like that. There's a picture of a Cobra R at the Dearborn Assembly Plant showroom that's in the binder. There's a sheet in here about the 2000 SVT Mustang Cobra R prototype unveiled, and it talks about North Carolina, I think, and when the Mustang Cobra was taken to Charlotte Motor Speedway during the Mustang Club of America's 35th anniversary celebration, and Tom Scarpello, who was a big SVT guy back then, he was showing the car off, and it says that it was Grabber Orange, a Grabber Orange Cobra R. I don't know if that's Performance Red or if they just called it that or if the prototype was that color or whatever, but I thought that was very interesting. It said that, and it just talked about the Cobra R and all the different neat things about it, the wheels, tires, you know, all the racing stuff that they had going on for the car, and that there would be 300 R models made, and that the Cobra R debuted in '93, and that they also had the 95 and the Cobra R. So these are all the Cobra R's it talked about, and you know, the Windsor engine and the 5-speed, and the older one with the 17x9 wheels, and now we have the newer Mustang that's going to have all of that and more. So the Cobra R really built off the heritage of the other two previous Cobra R's. They had another picture of a Cobra R and with the 00 on it that looked pretty cool. And then they just talked about how it sets a performance benchmark, and that this was an iconic car taken and developed specifically for racing, and 300 will be built at the Dearborn Assembly Plant in March of 2000. So that's pretty cool because those build numbers reflect that, the build production numbers and dates. And it says that this is the fastest and best handling Mustang ever, and it will set a performance benchmark for the competition. And that's John Coletti, famous for the Terminator, but he was working on these Cobra R's and stuff even back then, and so pretty cool to see all of that and just look through all this really cool documentation. And one of my favorite things was the sheet in the back. So if you stayed around for this, then this is probably one of my favorite parts, and it just shows that the 2000 SVT Cobra R partners in performance, and it has the contact list of all these manufacturers that worked with Ford to do this. And it talks about the rear brake pads by AKE Bono Akebono, if I said that right. Bassani had the X-Pipe, and it says to contact for off-road and high-flow cats if you want to do that with your car. B&M for the shifter, the Ripper shifter. I actually have a B&M Ripper shifter that came with one of my Cobras. The BF Goodrich, the custom 265/40 ZR18 tires. Bilstein, I can never decide how to say that, but those are the gas charge front and rear shocks. The Borla Performance Industries for the mufflers and side exit exhaust. Brembo for the aluminum fork piston front brake calipers and front rotors. Canton Racing Products, the oil pan we saw in the windage tray, which would be inside the oil pan. The iBox springs, we talked about those red racing springs, the suspension. Fuel safe systems for the 20-gallon bladder type fuel cell, the fuel tank in the back of the car. K&N for the cylindrical air filter. McLeod for the aluminum flywheel. And Multimatic, they made the carbon fiber front brake heat shields. So when I was looking at those spindles, I said, that looks like something's a little different. I guess that's what it was. I thought I did see some carbon fiber in there, and it really was. It was the shields for the brakes over there by the spindles. And then, of course, Recaro for the seats and Tremec for the T56 six-speed transmission. And so that's pretty cool to see that all these companies partnering to make one really awesome race car for the year 2000. Now, this isn't the lowest mile Cobra R out there. This is a pretty decently low mile car. There are some wrapper cars out there with basically no miles on them, 5 or 6 miles or so, and some sub 100-mile cars, but this is a really nice example of a stock Cobra R, non-raced, non-modified. From what we know, I mean, with 6 owners it could have been raced, but pretty cool to see. So it's pretty cool to see this Cobra R and learn a little bit about it and to review some of the stuff about the car. They are very special. Now, they're not very common. I don't believe they have as big of a following as like the Terminator Cobra, for example, just because of how few of these were produced, and you really don't see them out and about, and you don't see them as much on the racetrack as maybe other newer GT350s or anything like that, or GT500s for that matter. But they're really awesome cars. They're fun to see. The values are going up on them, and only time will tell what continues about these to become iconic and some of the most expensive Mustangs around for the SN95 platform. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more Mustang content.